There was a time when cheesy saxophone was a real aesthetic. I think we should go back to that era. One of the things that I really, really love about Whitney, and this is true of, I think, singers who really want to tell a story and really convey the meaning of the song, is that she is so good at not over-singing. She'll just kind of speak the words straight up, and she'll do that often in phrases. The there and the... Barbara Cook, the originator of the role Candide, came to Temple University, and she gave a masterclass, and all the students at Temple sang, and she like made basically every performer break down, because she got them to sing the words, really sing the words. Like she was like, "You sound great, now stop it." and you don't have to tell Whitney to stop it; she just does it, and so that's what I really love about her. Ooh, there's a reason why that note pops, other than the fact that it's a high note. There's a juxtaposition between her lifting the soft palate for that high note and what we hear here. What she's doing there is she's doming her soft palate. So let's go to our magic science machine where we can look at frequencies. So there's a big difference between and When we dome our soft palate, the higher frequencies go down in volume. And we can literally see that, right? We just see that here. When we phrase, we can utilize that. But low, very, very drip soft palate. And then right into the belt with the lifted soft palate. Come on. She's so good. Oh, notes popping out of a phrase. Right? If you go higher, you can dome your soft palate and then kill some of the higher frequencies so it doesn't burst out of your throat the way that it does here. But I love that she's basically saying, no, I want this high note to be dramatic. I think it's a really strong choice and it bucks convention. Not to mention, Whitney's belts. We were talking about older Mariah, so this is why there's a parallel here. Whitney's belts are lush, as far as belts are concerned. Usually with belts, you don't get a sense of lushness, and there's a reason why. In particular, that latter one is very bright. You can see that the super brightness comes in the higher frequencies, although the lower frequencies are bright as well. The more bright and more teal you see, the higher the volume for that frequency. You could say that all of them are about the same decibel level, and you'd be correct. But the reason why you don't hear lower sounds in a belt is because of the way that the human ear is tuned. Let's look at this. There's a graph showing the tuning of the human ear. The peak definitely happens at around 3K hertz. Let me expand this for you. Right around 3K hertz. So when everything is equal, when all frequencies have equal decibel levels, or another way, because you say the sound pressure level, the ear is going to pick up the higher frequencies. And so when we listen to belts, full circle, when we listen to belts, we generally don't hear low notes. We don't hear the lower frequencies. The reason why we get more lushness from Whitney doing this is that she retracts what are called the false folds. Belting is one of the more difficult things to do in singing. So what happens when you use too much air is your false folds contract. In order to not have that happen, you need to have incredible control of your exhale so that it's not too sudden, so that you can keep them retracted. This is if you want the depth, right? There are also ways to use your false folds, like, like you can do stuff. You don't always want them retracted, is my point. But in this case, that's what she accomplishes. Furthermore, her posture is ludicrous. And she's always this way, which I'm very, very jealous of. This is the hardest thing to teach in all of singing. And let me show you and illustrate why. Breathing is actually a misnomer. Instead of diaphragmatic breathing, you should just say breathing. Why is this? Just like to say diaphragmatic breathing is to say, go make your heart beat now. Whether or not you want it to happen, your diaphragm will work. Furthermore, there's no nerve endings on that massive muscle that will work no matter what. So to say diaphragmatic breathing is to say just to breathe, okay? But there is control that singers can have, right? We have breath control. What is breath control? We have to work with the muscles around the torso and basically our legs and our whole body because every muscle affects posture. When we look at the beginning of this stretch, we can see that the head is pretty convincingly above the knees, right? This is time-lapsed. I filmed it again after a little bit. Now my head is way below the knees. Okay, so going back to the analogy of like a balloon, right? If your torso is responsible for the rate of exhalation that you have when you were singing, and you are contracting habitually just to stand up, right? You could see that my back in that stretch video was super tight to the point where my head came forward a good foot. So these incredibly strong muscles are contracted. So immediately as I exhale, I'm already compromised. This is why I do a ton of compound stretches. And this goes back to why Whitney is so darn good with her breath. Her posture is phenomenal. So let's get back to Whitney. Weird in that you wouldn't think that restraint and less air would turn the tone into this warmer thing. But that's how it works. And that's, again, the thing I was talking about in the beginning. The way that she gives the words. And this is what I love about her, right? We get that epic, stupendous belt. And the next phrase, she'll do this. It's so dynamic in the performance, but it's also putting the words first, and I love her for that. So we get the phrase, the same phrase with the same words that we had before, right? Where she did this epic belt. It's a very, 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 very different approach to the same phrase. I get a lot of questions, how do I hit high notes? Right? That's what everyone wants to know. That is actually a very narrow-minded question. There is more than one way to hit a high note. There's many. And this is an example of that in action. This is really cool. This little nugget right here. So, what happens during a belt? What is a belt? A belt is when this cartilage on the very low end of your larynx, okay? This cartilage will tilt, making the folds fat, right? So that's what a belt is. But this tilting is a motion, right? It's not like, it's motion. So what I love about this is that she's not trying to sustain the belt here. She's just going up, tilts the cricoid, and then untilts it very quickly. And that's awesome. It's just like a little cool little thing that she did there. Okay, we have to talk about onsets, but let's just first let's point out why we're going to talk about onsets, which is this amazing sense of rhythm. Listen to her consonants relative to the drums and how together those are. So we actually covered this in another video, but it wasn't this pronounced. This is very, very, very pronounced. So these are called glottals, well, I'll show you with waveforms and stuff. This is cool. There was a question that was brought up. Why does Whitney belt closer to the mic? So I've thrown on a tremendous amount of compression onto my microphone. A compressor is something that crushes the audio and compresses the dynamic range. So louder notes are softer, softer notes are louder, compressed, right? So when we're singing higher notes, usually we pull back so that we don't get, bazonked. We don't demolish the microphone. But when you have a lot of compression, you can get closer. And when you get closer, you can get the proximity effect, which is a boost to the lows. So this happens. Right? Very, very different. So let me record one with compression and one without. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to dial the compression down as I sing. Very, 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 very different in terms of the sound. Adjust my levels back to where they were. Let's play that. So that is why she'll get close to the mic. You'll get way fatter of a sound. There was a little clipping, which stinks on the first one, but that is the idea there. So anyway, let's go back to Whitney. Ooh, yes. Okay. So there's two things to talk about here. This straight tone note. She is not tilting. So there's a couple of ways to hit high notes. One way is to tilt the thyroid cartilage, and that's opera. Right. Right. Classical singing, right? The other is to tilt your cricoid belt. We've talked about that. Falsetto is an option. Mixing is an option. The hardest, probably, I would say the hardest, other than belting, would be keeping the larynx high and the folds together. As your folds thin and thin and thin, you must use less and less air to avoid having them burst open into falsetto. So, when she goes up here, and she has full vocal closure, and then she brings in that thyroid tilt, that's extremely difficult. Lots of singers, when they first start singing, they don't want soft high notes. They think it's wrong. The way you fix not loud high notes is you tilt. So the coordination is completely separate. You need to be able to do this. And then if you want volume, there's things you can do on top of that. But to get there, this is how gentle high notes have to be. Tilt or not. Using mic technique as part of the run. I mean, come on. These very, very quick runs here. Let's find it. This one. To pull that off, and there's a consistent theme here. To pull that off, you need very, 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 very thin folds, right? The fatter the folds are, the harder they have a hard time moving around and adjusting to different pitches. So it's very normal when you do runs to have very thin folds. It's usually a go-to. But it's the fact that she's so dynamic with all of these different fat folds, thin folds, belting. So she'll go from that to, right? So very, very thin, more of a belt here. Well, not a belt, but, you know, fuller voice. And then she speaks. And this is what she's so good at this, and she does this everywhere. It's the same themes applied specifically to the phrases as she sees is best, right? We're not going over many new tricks here. These are some of the same things that we've been talking about, but the thing is that they're applied very specifically to the phrase. And she keeps doing it and doing it and doing it. And this is why she's a great person to listen to remember, oh yeah, I have to give more details to the words. So we were talking about the false folds. So this is actually an example of them contracting on purpose. That little bit of to the tone, right? It's not nasality. It's actually the constriction of the false fold. So if I'm speaking right now, I have the habit of keeping them wide just because I'm opera training, and just kind of that becomes your default. But if I wanted to talk normally, this would be actually the voice I would have if I were to talk normally and my false folds were not retracted. If they're constricted, you get a little bit of this. So you can use all that. And it's just for like a little bit of a second right here. Oh, she's just so darn good. Oh man. This is the exercise. This is an exercise. If you want to know that you have a note or not, or even if you're training your high notes, this is a great exercise. This. That slow crescendo. That it's so easy for her is telling, but it's a wonderful exercise that we should all do. Ooh, wow. So, and we're getting into the good stuff. I'm sorry to pause this, but it's important we take a note of this. So these are more like she's giving a lot of juice here, but she didn't start the note with a lot of juice. She's basically sustaining a very, very epic thing. So, sorry, my dog is... When she starts that, it's actually quite gentle, and then she ramps up the volume. You hear that when she's on Cuz, right? And that run is brilliant and difficult, and it's musically makes sense. So it's great that way, and that like it makes musical sense. But then on top of that, we've gotten like very thick folds, very, very like not nasty vocals, but big. They're big vocals. And she goes up with, it's not like a shout, but these like super, super thick folds. And then immediately they thin to do the run. Oh, man. Singers that came before the digital era of audio have amazing mic technique because you couldn't do a lot in post. I mean, you could. It was just preposterously expensive. And you couldn't do a lot with very few takes. You had to you had to do it, well, you didn't have a lot of takes, is what I should say. Because the more takes that you get, it was the more tape, and tape was really expensive. But that's how these were recorded. So singers from the 90s have this incredible mic technique. But there's another thing I actually want to talk about here as a way to practice using some of the ideas that she does here. Mental thing about singing, right? When you have a high note, that's usually the apex of the phrase. And in the race to have powerful high notes, what singers often mess up is that you can't, if you bring everything you got on the notes before it, say the phrase is this. Simple, right? If you try to go big on this note, your folds are already very, very fat to create that bigger sound, so that as you go up, you're going to have more and more trouble. So you have to know, you have to get this right, this higher note. Ah, ah, right? So that's the loudest I can get. Ah, ah, right? And that's what we should see on the tail end of that. It is a mistake to do this, and this is what you hear often. Ah, that's going to be strident, it's going to be flat, and it's going to be a problem. That's what that looks like. So don't sausage your phrase. Anyway, let's get back to Whitney. A lot of really cool stuff here with vowels and mic technique in combination. Okay. I have a condenser microphone and not a dynamic, so it's going to be a little bit harder to demonstrate this. But let's see. Can you see my microphone? Yes, you can see my... Okay, this is my microphone. So let's go to Frequencyville again. And let's record what an oo vowel sounds like straight ahead. As delicate as I can. Right? That's delicate. What happens if I turn the mic sideways? Frontwards? Oh yeah, cracked extra. I flipped. There. We can see that at the end of this. Let me bring it into view. We can see at the end of this that the higher frequencies go away. The benefit of this is that it sounds more like a flute, right? Just by changing the mic technique. And this isn't about distance. That's also a factor, right? That she's changing the volume by the proximity of the microphone. The closer, the louder, right? So it's the combination of the two. She's tilting the mic to the side, or well, I mean, you know what I'm saying. And then she's moving it away from her. And then she gets right up on it. And this is the one I wanted to talk about before this moment here. The use of a vowel on the bottom. Let's go back to Frequencyville. You know, Science Town, if you will. So what is that? That one. That's what we want. So as I change my vowel, you can see that there's an increase in the upper partials, right? We'd call this brighter vowels, right? Ah versus ah, right? That's just what she just did. This is a serious change in the tone. Vowels, just making vowel sounds is like a super fundamental part of singing. And the reason why it's important to remember that is because great singers use it very effectively. We've seen that she's been doing all sorts of things, right? Higher notes, mic technique, delicate notes, percussive vowels, percussive, consonants. But that's as basic as it gets in terms of technique. You could do that right now, probably, right? It's not... I think people get into this head-to-head. They're like, this singer has more technique or better technique, as though technique is like a monolith, as if you don't like have a ton of options, right? It's silly when we put singers like in head-to-heads. I do it because it's great for the YouTube channel. It makes, people are going to click on my videos, but it's silly to do in practice, because what Whitney is doing here is these are the artistic decisions that she generally does on a consistent basis, and it is inconsistently making these choices that she is her artist, right? That is what defines her as an artist, that she makes these specific choices on the regular and varies them up and switches them up, etc. Right? But it's very different from other singers. Aren't we at this point? Are we not ready for a high note? I got chills right now. This is exciting to me. There's a build up here, right? I'm not gonna say that's. Let's just say something was withheld from us. This goes back to what we were talking about with don't make the high note. The high note has to be louder than the notes previous, and if you try to do not that, you're going to go flat on the high note because you're bringing to the fatness of the folds you're bringing up, and that won't work. This is that concept in the music sense, right? In the way that the pace of the song is. That buildup was so dramatic that if she gives us a dramatic high note there, the dramatic high note that might come after it won't be as significant. I imagine there's one at the end. Ooh, ending on the 9th. That's very jazz. Let's see. Or it was a minor, I guess. Yeah. I love that. Ending on the 9th is like a very jazz thing to do. So there wasn't a high note, but there was another build, right? So if she does a high note here, this build is less significant. I am partial to this. I am biased towards this kind of decision making because it's something I understand and know. But this is not better or worse. It's just like Whitney being Whitney, which I love. I happen to love that a lot. But it's cool, I think, when we go over these things to appreciate that there's a consistency in the decision-making that makes an artist an artist. And this is just a pleasure to kind of listen to her and talk about those.